All right, welcome back. You may recall that last week we were talking about the apostolic church, the church that was really rolling out right off the press, right out of the gate with the apostles. You remember they were kind of figuring things out. They knew they were supposed to spread the gospel, but they were still answering some really fundamental questions about what teachings to follow and what does it mean to be a church, right? What we start to see, though, moving out of those early questions, is we start to see authority in the church being hashed out and being established. And so we want to look at, during this presentation today, the authority structure of the church and how that's come about, okay? So this will be really helpful for us, I think. There's a lot of terms and words maybe that we're not familiar with, or we've heard, but we're not sure exactly how they fit in or where they work. So anyways, want to look at and examine the church hierarchy. All right, maybe that's a word that you've heard of before, right? Hierarchy, right? In many places, every company has a hierarchy, every organization has a hierarchy. So the church's hierarchy as well has been there really from the beginning. This governance structure, it's really important to realize this. A lot of people look at the Vatican and they see cardinals and they see all these offices and they're like, oh, that's all, that can't be what Jesus had in mind and what the apostles had in mind. No. The governance structure was really developed while the apostles were still alive. Now, that doesn't mean that St. Peter's Basilica was built then or that they had that many offices, but of course the church has grown over the 2,000 years, right? But the general structure of how the church is governed was really laid out and hashed out during the apostolic church, while the apostles were still alive. Okay? Even at the Last Supper, Christ starts to form his apostles and teach them and talk to them about authority. But it's a really different authority than we normally think of, right? Here's what Jesus says at the Last Supper. He said to them, "The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those in authority over them are addressed as benefactors. But among you it shall not be so. Rather, let the greatest among you be as the youngest, and the leader as the servant." The leader as the servant. Okay? "I am among you as the one who serves," Jesus says. So it kind of flips the authority. Most of the time we think of power and authority as being sort of a top-down thing. Here Jesus is saying, look, you will have authority, but that authority should inspire you to be a servant. Right? One of the titles of the Pope is servant of the servants of God. Right? He's meant to serve the servants of God, which is all of us. So the Pope is not like the king. He is the person who is here and is sent to serve the rest of us, just as Jesus washed the feet at the Last Supper. So we are meant to serve, and if we have any authority in the church, we are meant to serve other people, not to sit there and use that authority for any personal gain, or sit around on our couches and watch TV all day. All right, the hierarchy of the church. I kind of put these in different categories, but this is from the most powerful all the way down to the least powerful in that sense. But that's not really, again, we're going to talk about how that's not the way to view it. Okay, but of course, obviously, we know at the top of the church we have the Pope, then we have cardinals, then we have archbishops, then we have bishops, then we have priests, deacons, and the laity. Okay, so that's now. It's really important to understand that these first four are really all just bishops. Okay? Popes, cardinals, archbishops, and bishops are all really just bishops with different titles, and we'll talk about why they have those titles. Okay, priests and deacons, it's important to understand that these two were created just to help the bishops. Okay? And then we have the laity, which is everybody who doesn't take a vow, become a monk or a brother or sister, and also isn't a priest or a bishop or a deacon. Okay, so that's most of the vast majority of the world, is the laity. All right, now we're going to talk about all three of these categories. Let's look at the papacy first, okay? Christ established the apostles as the heads of the church. He said, you are the heads of the church, right? He makes that very clear. But he also appoints Simon as the head of the apostles. So, and again, that's very clear when you read the scriptures. It's very clear. Even after Jesus is gone, it's very clear that the rest of the apostles continue to turn to Peter to have debates and things settled, disputes, etc. Okay? So, the papacy is, Christ founds the church on St. Peter, and St. Peter or Simon. Simon is Peter. This is the same, interchangeable, right? Jesus actually changes Simon's name to Peter when he makes him the first pope and says, I will build my church upon you and I'm going to now call you Peter, right? Peter's authority is clear throughout, again, it's clear throughout the New Testament, all right? And so all the popes are people who are the successors of St. Peter, right? So somebody has to fill over that leadership role. Jesus establishes the leadership role, and someone has taken that place then ever since, just as people could take the place of the apostles, because they all died. Okay. Now, so as we think about the Pope, let's think about those phrase papal infallibility, because it's really key. And a lot of people, a lot of non-Catholics get really upset, get really intense about this, or not sure what it is, what we believe about papal infallibility. Okay, infallible is a really simple. Fallible means that you can err. So if you're infallible, it means you cannot err. You cannot, teach something that's false, etc. Okay. This is the teaching that the Pope can proclaim a doctrine with regards to faith and morals without error. Okay? The teaching that the Pope can proclaim a doctrine with regards to faith and morals without error. Now this papal infallibility is rarely invoked. And that's so key to understanding this, right? It is very rare where the Pope comes out and says, through my infallible authority that I've been given, I am teaching this. I am helping us understand this, and he go on to proclaim some doctrine, right? The vast majority of time, the papal infallibility is not used. In fact, you could argue that the last 3 or 4 popes haven't even used it. Now, what you have is various levels of authority. So it might not be infallible, but a pope or somebody might teach something that's less at a different level than that. But still some authority behind it. It's not saying there's either or, either it's infallible or it's something that's just hogwash. No, what we're saying is that there's papal infallibility, but again, which is rarely used. But then you also have lots of other types of authority levels behind different teachings that the Pope or the apostles or the bishops, etc., would issue, the church would issue. Okay, but again, it's real important when you hear, sometimes people think that the Pope walks around and papal infallibility means that the Pope walks around and just can't ever do anything wrong, and everything that he says is perfect, and everything that, whatever, right? That's what I always kind of thought of it as when I first heard it. But obviously that messes people up, because then they'll say, well, what about Pope such and such who committed sin such and such, fathered a child outside of marriage, or had, a prostitute or whatever. You've seen all the HBO movies, which the vast majority of it's all made up, right? The television shows and movies. But certainly there's no doubt that popes have sinned, sometimes very heinously in the past, right? And so people say, well, you Catholics, you talk about papal infallibility, but then these popes are sinning. Well, there's nothing in this idea of papal infallibility that says a pope will not sin. It says when the pope, in very specific instances, is teaching something and he decides to use his papal infallibility, he can teach us something about faith and morals, and that we can believe that we are protected from error, that the church is protected, that the Pope is protected from error in those very rare instances, right? That doesn't say anything about sin. It doesn't say anything about any of those other things, right? So yes, papal infallibility is still there, even though a particular Pope might commit some sin or another, right? Or do something else, whatever. It's really confusing a lot of times. People get that all messed up, and it's really important to understand what papal infallibility covers and what it doesn't. Okay, so back to our image here that we've been looking at, the 4 different types, the bishops, archbishops, cardinals, and pope, right? Again, really remembering that they're all really just bishops that have been given, some of them have been given other titles. So let's look now at cardinals, right? Let's look at the cardinals. These are not mentioned in Scripture per se, but the church hadn't really grown to be nearly as big as it is today. By the time the Scriptures are concluded, the church was still relatively small and definitely growing, right? So that's really important to understand. Okay, some people are like, oh, there's no cardinals in the Scriptures. Well, of course not, because the church was very small compared to what it is today, okay? So the cardinals, who are the cardinals? As the church grew across the world, some bishops were asked to fill a leadership role in helping the Pope govern the church. As the church grew, it was one of those things where the Pope could not oversee every single aspect of all the administrative work that needs to be done. And you can just imagine all the work that would need to be done to help keep the Catholic Church, just from an administrative perspective. The secretary work and all of the offices and various, attempts and efforts to keep things going in all these different directions. If you think about, the church is 1.2 billion people right now in the world, right? And so there's so much that needs to be done in order to keep that going, not just in our own local parishes, but also obviously at an international level. And so the Pope, as the church grows, the Pope creates cardinals, creates this new sort of, it's kind of, basically the title or the thought there is like that they are a prince of the church. So if the Pope is the king in the sense of the king who has the most authority, again, what does that authority look like? Is it authority to go around and boss everyone around? No, it's the authority that we said earlier, the authority to serve. So in the same sense, a cardinal is a prince of the church, but in the sense that a prince then is also going to be called not to walk around and lord it over other people, but to serve even more fully the rest of the church. Not serve less, serve us more, serve the people of God more, right? Okay, so there again, but there's still bishops. Okay, the Pope is a bishop, the Bishop of Rome. Okay, that's what the Pope is. The cardinals are bishops who, again, have been given this special task of helping govern in certain ways wherever the Pope sees fit. Okay, and so we, of course, very excitedly, we have a cardinal of our own now, right? Archbishop Tobin. For the archdiocese, our archdiocese here of Indianapolis, just last Sunday was named a cardinal, and he'll be given that official designation and so forth on November 19th at St. Peter's in Rome, right? But it's certainly very exciting. Here's the this is his coat of arms, and you can see with the red hat and the red tassels there. That's something that you're only going to see on a cardinal's coat of arms. And then there's Archbishop Tobin at the press conference this week where he announced that. So very exciting times to have a cardinal. We never had a cardinal in charge of Indianapolis before. So Archbishop Tobin, then again, just to kind of break that down, as he said in his press conference, Archbishop Tobin will, because he's a cardinal, he will now be doing a lot more in Rome. Now, a lot more. I don't know how much more, but he's certainly more than he does now. He'll have to go to Rome more often because he'll probably be put in charge of some things that will be for the whole church, the whole universal church, and not just so much stuff just in Indianapolis. But of course, he continues to be our archbishop, which is really awesome, right? He's still here, he's still our shepherd, and yet he'll also be doing he'll kind of be doing two roles. So he'll be in charge in helping lead our archdiocese, and then also performing some roles to help Pope Francis with the universal church. So very exciting. Keep him in prayer. That's obviously a big responsibility as well. And I know that I'm sure that he's excited, but also very humbled by it. And so we'll certainly keep Archbishop Tobin, now Cardinal Designate Tobin, in our prayers. On November 19th, it'll just be Cardinal Tobin, which is really unbelievable and awesome. Okay, so as we look at that, let's look at then, okay, so we've talked about popes, we've talked about cardinals, archbishops and bishops, okay? When you are ordained a bishop, there is nothing higher to be ordained to. Okay, so the three ways that you get ordained. You first get ordained a deacon, then you would get ordained a priest, but then once you get ordained a bishop, so it's kind of like it's almost like an upgrade, if you will, right? When you're ordained a deacon, and then you can get the upgrade and be ordained a priest, but then you can get the final upgrade, which would be you get ordained a bishop. Because all the bishops are the filling in for and doing the work of the apostles and ministering and fulfilling that role, right? So these guys, again, are more titles that a bishop can have, but you don't go any higher ordination-wise than a bishop, okay? So let's look at the bishops. A bishop is literally then a successor of the apostles, right? So we think about those apostles ordained other bishops to take their place, and those guys ordained other bishops to take their place, and on and on and on, all the way down to Archbishop Tobin, right, who is ordained and was given that title to be a bishop, and now he's been given the assignment of our archdiocese. So this 2,000-year game of tag that goes all the way back to the apostles, where they've been. So bishops are successors of the apostles. An archbishop then is just a bishop that helps oversee a few other dioceses in addition to his own archdiocese. So an archbishop is really, again, just a title that is given to a person who is asked to oversee an archdiocese. The other dioceses around that archdiocese then, in a sense, are kind of under that. But I think if you talk to Archbishop Tobin, the number of times where an archbishop or an archdiocese would come into another diocese and have any sort of real authority over them is extremely rare. Extremely, extremely rare, right? So if we look at just a map here really quickly, we see here, this is the Archdiocese of Indianapolis in yellow. It's the southern half of Indiana, except for these 9, I believe it's 9 counties that make up the Diocese of Evansville. Okay. Then we have the blue here. This is the Diocese of Lafayette. And then up here we have the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend. And then we have the Diocese of Gary. So Evansville, Diocese of Lafayette, Diocese of Gary, Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend. Those are all dioceses. Ours is an archdiocese. Okay. And so because it's an archdiocese, that means then again, these dioceses kind of in a sense defer to us very rarely. I bet it happens once every 10 years, but I'm just guessing that it ever matters that we are an archdiocese and they are not. It's not like we charge them taxes or anything like that. Okay, so but that's what the term archdiocese comes from. An archbishop then is typically a person who oversees an archdiocese. Sometimes archbishops again are given other roles in the universal church as well. Okay, so we have bishops, archbishops, cardinals, and popes. We've talked about that. All right, priests and deacons. Let's look at these guys here. Priests and deacons down here, which are guys who are not bishops, obviously, or anything higher than that. Priests are deputized by the bishop to help the bishop with the sacraments. So what happens is, in the early church, is that the bishops, the apostles, were originally just the 12 of them celebrating the masses, celebrating the sacraments, etc. They very quickly grew to the point where the bishops could not cover the territory. The apostles could not cover the territory. So pretty early on in the church, 2 positions were created to help with the sacraments. Actually, the first position that was created was the deacon. The deacon was created, and they were given certain powers by the bishop or by the apostles, certain authority. They were ordained to do certain things, but not others. Okay. In the same way, priests are given, as I said, kind of an upgrade. Priests are typically given more ability to do more sacraments on behalf of the bishop who simply cannot be there and get to every place. So while the bishop, in a sense, kind of has his own authority and is kind of a self-sustaining a successor of the apostle, and his diocese is sort of that sovereign place, I minister as a priest totally, although I've been ordained to be a priest, and I've been given these things, and I'm changed in a permanent way that I can never go back, and just sort of give these gifts back. I've been changed in a way permanently, but that's through I minister at the will of the bishop. The bishop tells me where to go. The bishop tells me he could call and actually say, you're not, I'm taking some of I'm not allowing you to use some of your powers to preach, or I'm not allowing you to hear confessions, or I'm not allowing you to say mass, or whatever. So it's important to see, I think, priests and deacons as basically helping bring the sacraments on behalf of the bishop to a particular place, right? That's exactly what I do here then at Annunciation in St. Paul's. I've been sent here to bring the sacraments on behalf of Archbishop Tobin, who simply cannot be at St. Paul's and Annunciation and the other 140 whatever parishes that are in the Archdiocese every Saturday and Sunday, okay? So, but again, we are ordained, it changes us as a deacon and as a priest. It changes us in a way that is a permanent change that overtakes us as a priest and a deacon. Our priesthood flows from Christ, of course, but our authority as a pastor, as a deacon, flows also from the bishop. He could call me tomorrow, and although I'd still be a priest, he could tell me I am to stop celebrating Mass, or stop hearing confessions, or stop preaching, etc. Okay? Deacons are similarly ordained, but are not given by Christ the power to say Mass, not given the power to hear confessions, not given power to anoint the sick. They are able to baptize, preach, preside over weddings and funerals that are not Masses, and so forth. Okay? So that's basically what we have going on there, these deputies, if you will, of the bishop that help bring the sacraments to the people. All right, let's look at the final piece here of the puzzle, the laity. Many people say, a phrase that I've heard a lot, which I agree with wholeheartedly and I think is perfect. Many people are using the phrase that we are now entering the age of the laity. all right, which I agree wholeheartedly, and I say thank God. Okay, now who are the laity? The laity are all those who are not ordained, okay, and who also do not take religious vows to become a monk, brother, sister, or nun. Okay, so if you're not we typically call that like religious. So if you're not living the religious life, although we're all religious in that sense, right? Of course, but we hear that that's a typical term. Those who are living the religious life as a nun, a monk, brother, sister, etc. Okay, if you're not living that way and you're not ordained as either a deacon, priest, or bishop, then you are part of the laity, which is the vast majority of Catholics throughout the world, of course, right? Okay, now, what we hear then is a phrase that we heard it at the Second Vatican Council, we've heard it in many other places as well. We hear about the priesthood of all believers. The priesthood of all believers. So the laity have, in a sense, a priesthood. Now, it's not the same as this type of priesthood here that we were ordained to receive and bring the sacraments. But what we mean by the priesthood of all believers is that all persons who are baptized to be three things. And the same type of thing, but in a different way, that priests are ordained to be priests for. Now, when we are ordained priests, or when we are baptized to be a priest, prophet, and king. You might have heard those three words, right? Priest, prophet, king. Now, when you are baptized, what does it mean that you are baptized to be a priest? A priest is a person any person, like thinking of priests, all different types of priests, even non-Catholic priests. Priests in general are people who offer sacrifices, okay? So you, as a layperson, are baptized to become a priest, and the priesthood of all believers, in the sense that you are asked by God, given the command by God, really, to offer sacrifices of yourself, of your time, of your energy, etc. Another thing that you were baptized to be as a priest, the priesthood of all believers, is you were baptized to be a prophet. You were baptized to preach to the nations, whether you like it or not, right? And sometimes we wish we weren't. We struggle with that. We're like, man, that's tough. I take courage. I'm not good with words. I don't, whatever. We think a lot of the reasons why we shouldn't be doing it or why we can't. But God says, like, it doesn't matter. I give you what you need. I give you the strength. I give you the Holy Spirit. You are to be a prophet to the nations, right? And then a king, you were baptized to lead, all right? So you're baptized as a Christian, you are baptized as a king in the sense of being given the authority, the power to lead other people to Christ, okay? So to lead and to rule in that sense. And so all people, all the laity, through their baptism, have been given these three gifts at their baptism that we sometimes call the priesthood of all believers. Again, that doesn't mean everybody's a priest in the sense that I'm a priest, but it's a very beautiful way to understand and think about what the laity are and who the laity are, and a reminder that our baptism changes us, and it changes you in a permanent way and in an unchangeable way, just as it happens to a priest as well when he's also ordained. Okay? So, a couple of other final terms here. The Roman Curia might be a phrase that you've heard. Archbishop Tobin he used to work in the Roman Curia, even though he wasn't a cardinal. Lots of people work in the Roman Curia, even though they're not cardinals. But I'm sure he'll be pulled back into that a little bit to work a little bit more in the Roman Curia. The Roman Curia is just the leadership of the Vatican offices and all the Vatican administration. Okay, so again, all those different offices and groups of people. If you went on World Youth Day, you saw a lot of the buildings and everything back there. Again, it takes people to run a 1.2 billion member organization, right? And so we have the Roman Curia is the leadership of that. There's lay people in that. There's cardinals, bishops, archbishops, lots of different people involved, and more and more lay people are being brought in to do things like finances and things that they have more expertise at than probably most cardinals do, right? So we're bringing in, I think, which is a good thing, I think we're bringing in a lot of lay people to help with the Roman Curia, whereas maybe in the past it wasn't so much that way. But again, the Roman Curia is that. The magisterium, you might also hear that phrase, that's the teaching authority of the Pope and bishops in conjunction with him. So anytime you hear the people talking about the magisterium, what they mean there is the teaching authority that the church has been given and entrusted with, to continue to unpack the mysteries of Christ, to continue to allow the Holy Spirit to teach and give wisdom to all of us. So the magisterium is that teaching authority. Magister is a translation of teacher. So when you hear the word magisterium, that's what you should think about. Okay, I just threw up this, found this off of Wikipedia. This is a little image of the Roman Curia, all the different secretariats and different offices and congregations. So we have different congregations set up for divine worship and the discipline of the sacraments, the group that oversees Mass. There's a congregation that oversees the causes of the saints. There's a congregation that oversees the bishops and just kind of make sure that they're doing and staying on track and doing what they need to do. There's one for an office for the overseeing religious life. There's one that oversees Catholic education around the world, that oversees seminaries. There's other offices for the laity, family, all these different things. I mean, you can go on and on. There's just a ton of different offices there in the Roman Curia. But that might give you a snapshot of some of the different things that need to be overseen if you're going to have a church like ours that is running all over the world for the whole world. Okay, questions? First of all, this first question is about the little excerpt that's in your book about the Eastern Catholic churches. Okay, in your book, why are there Eastern Catholic churches? Okay, why do those exist? What are they, and why? The actual question is, why are there these types of churches? Okay, so go ahead and look at that. Read through that. That's a really interesting thing. You might have heard of some of that thing. You might have heard of Byzantine Catholic churches or etc. That's all explained really nicely and succinctly in your book. So I want you to read that, and then I want you to tell me why there are Eastern and Western Catholic churches in that sense. Okay? Number 2, can you as a member of the Catholic Church receive communion at an Eastern Catholic divine liturgy? Okay, so that's the same type of thing. Can you receive communion at an Eastern Catholic divine liturgy? Number 3, once you are ordained a bishop, can you be ordained to anything else? If so, what? Once you are ordained a bishop, can you be ordained to anything else? If so, what? Okay, number 4, once you are ordained a bishop, can you be given other titles? Once you are ordained a bishop, can you be given other titles? If so, what are those other titles that you could be given as a bishop? Number 5, there are 2 types of ministers who are ordained to serve for a bishop because the church is so large. What are those 2 types of ministers that are who are ordained to serve for a bishop? Number 6, does our belief in papal infallibility mean that we believe a pope will never make a mistake? Does our belief in papal infallibility mean that we believe a pope will never make a mistake? And then finally, number 7, does our belief in papal infallibility mean that we believe a pope will never sin? Does our belief in papal infallibility mean that we believe a pope will never sin? Okay? Something that's just to think about, a closing thought, a little closing piece of reflection. How are you with authority? You know, we've been talking, this whole thing's been about authority in the church and who has authority, etc., and what that authority really means, which is the authority really means to serve. Okay? But I think a lot of people today struggle with the idea of authority. They struggle with someone telling them what to do or giving them any kind of teaching, right? And so we struggle with the notion of authority. We all kind of, it seems like more and more we want the authority ourselves. And we kind of, but that's really kind of a struggle, because then we become God in a sense when no one else is there. That when we're not listening to anyone else that God has put in our lives to kind of guide us and teach us and help us, then we become God ourselves. And so as we think about authority in the church, a lot of people think, oh, that's so bad, and God didn't want authority, and Jesus just wanted everybody to get hang out and get along. Well, in reality, God did set it up this way because we do need this authority structure, because it's the way in which we operate, and it's the way in which Christ continues to come to us. The Spirit continues to work through the church. Jesus set it up this way. And so if you have a problem with authority, then you have a problem with Jesus. If God had wanted us to just talk with Jesus on our own and figure everything out that way, He would have said it that way. But He didn't. He set up a church. He set up a church that has authority, different levels of that. Pope at the head with Peter, and then the apostles, and then, on and on. Okay? So, as Catholics, I think we can always ask ourselves, how are we with authority? Part of being Catholic is being okay and realizing that there is, that authority is part of the church. And that authority ultimately then, again, of course, means not to rule over people, but to serve. So we pray for those who are in authority over us in the church, that we may have the ability, the grace to listen to them, and to the humility to be guided by them. So that's all we have for today. I hope you have a blessed week. And again, keep Archbishop Tobin in your prayers as he gets ready to officially be named a cardinal. And if there's ever any questions or anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to call. God bless.